What happens when the man who almost conquered Hollywood reappears, this time with a plan far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined? Ibrahim Traoré's disappearance after the Hollywood resistance exposed his true ambitions left the world on edge. Hollywood had won the battle, but the war for control over global culture was far from over. Traoré had slipped into the shadows, but his absence wasn't the end, it was merely the calm before the storm. Months passed, and Hollywood began to rebuild itself. Creators who had once feared Traoré's influence returned to their art with renewed passion, determined to protect the creative freedom they'd almost lost. But just as the dust seemed to settle, a chilling message was delivered to the highest echelons of Hollywood. Ibrahim Traoré was back, and this time, he was targeting more than just the entertainment industry. It started with subtlety. Traoré, having learned from his previous mistakes, no longer relied solely on financial manipulation or cultural pressure. Instead, he was building a network of influence across industries. Politicians, tech moguls, and religious leaders all found themselves drawn to his cause. His charm was irresistible, and his ability to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of influential people made him a dangerous force once more. The media, now controlled by Traoré's growing alliance, began to spread a different narrative, one where Hollywood was not the savior of culture, but the culprit of its decay. Movies, they argued, glorified violence, consumerism, and materialism. Traoré's vision for a spiritually pure world gained traction. Through carefully crafted speeches and a rebranding campaign, he presented himself as not just a religious leader, but a cultural visionary. His message resonated with a public increasingly disillusioned with the status quo, fueling a new wave of support. Hollywood wasn't the only battleground anymore. Traoré was aiming for the very heart of global culture, and he was doing it with a calculated blend of media manipulation, political leverage, and moral righteousness. The church had already publicly supported his message, but now he was seeking to unite the world under his banner, by tapping into the very industries that defined the 21st century: entertainment, technology, and religion. But just when it seemed that Traoré's influence was unstoppable, the resistance was revived. A coalition of filmmakers, political leaders, and grassroots activists who had once stood against him now regrouped, determined to expose his true intentions once and for all. They knew that if Traoré was allowed to succeed this time, the world would never be the same. They began to work in secret, uncovering a vast network of alliances Traoré had built, unaware that they were being watched by a force far more powerful than before. It wasn't long before the resistance uncovered something chilling, a new weapon in Traoré's arsenal. A global digital platform, one that had the power to control information, was quietly being developed by one of Traoré's closest allies in Silicon Valley. This platform wasn't just a tool for communication, it was designed to track and influence the opinions of billions. Traoré wasn't just shaping content anymore, he was shaping reality itself. What if the war for global influence isn't fought on the streets or in the boardrooms, but in your very mind? Ibrahim Traoré has a new weapon, and it could change the world forever. The world had barely begun to process the shock of Ibrahim Traoré's return when the full extent of his new weapon was revealed. The resistance, once confident in their ability to fight against him, now realized they were facing an adversary unlike any they had encountered before. It wasn't just Hollywood that was in danger anymore. It was the very fabric of global society. Traoré's digital platform, which he had been quietly developing with the help of Silicon Valley's tech elite, was the cornerstone of his new strategy. It wasn't just another social media app or streaming service. This platform, cleverly named SoulNet, was designed to do something no one had thought possible. It would track the thoughts and behaviors of its users, shaping their beliefs and opinions with unprecedented precision. At first, it seemed harmless enough. SoulNet presented itself as a social network focused on uplifting content, spiritual guidance, and moral values. It promised to connect people with like-minded individuals and foster a positive, community-driven online space. But what the world didn't know was that behind the scenes, Traoré had embedded sophisticated algorithms designed to analyze users' every action. From what they liked, to who they interacted with, and even what they viewed, SoulNet was gathering data at an unimaginable scale. The platform didn't just want to be a hub for discussion, it wanted to become the central node of global influence. Through subtle, algorithm-driven nudges, it began to push users toward Traoré's vision of a spiritually guided world. The more time people spent on Solnet, the more they were exposed to his messages that questioned the moral decay of modern society, the materialism of Hollywood, and the moral bankruptcy of the entertainment industry. Traoré was no longer just shaping culture through film or television, he was manipulating it at its very core. For many, Solnet seemed like the perfect escape from the chaos of modern life. People who were disillusioned by political corruption, the erosion of spiritual values, or the exploitation they saw in the entertainment industry were drawn to his message. Traoré's platform offered a sense of belonging, purpose, and community. Slowly but surely, it began to gather millions of followers, many of whom had no idea they were being subtly shaped by the very algorithms designed to promote Traoré's agenda. Hollywood's resistance, initially focused on the industry itself, now realized they were fighting a battle on a much larger scale. Traoré's influence had infiltrated the very systems of communication, entertainment, and politics that had shaped the world. No longer were they just battling for creative freedom, they were battling for the minds of the global population. In a desperate move, the resistance launched their own campaign, an expose of Solnet's true intentions. They began to leak information about the platform's algorithms, revealing how Traoré's influence was embedded in every corner of the digital space. But even as they tried to expose the truth, they faced a growing number of obstacles. Traoré's digital empire was everywhere. On phones, laptops, televisions, and social media feeds. His supporters, who now numbered in the millions, pushed back against the resistance, calling them enemies of spiritual enlightenment. Just when the resistance thought they had uncovered the full scope of Traoré's plan, a stunning revelation hit. Solnet wasn't just a tool for shaping opinions, it was a tool for control. Traoré had secretly embedded a failsafe in the platform's algorithms, one that could manipulate public opinion at a scale never before seen. If Solnet reached enough users, it could sway elections, dictate global policy, and even control the very decisions made by governments. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just after culture anymore, he was aiming for global domination. What if the greatest weapon ever invented wasn't a bomb or an army, it was a single idea? Traoré isn't just controlling information, he's controlling minds. As Ibrahim Traoré's influence began to spread through Solnet, the world slowly started to realize that this battle was unlike anything they had ever faced. It wasn't about money or power, it was about control over thought itself. Solnet, a platform designed to manipulate culture, had become the key to shaping the opinions of millions. Traoré wasn't just influencing what people watched, he was now dictating how they thought, what they believed, and how they saw the world. The resistance had tried everything: public exposés, leaks, and even counter-campaigns. But every attempt to reveal the truth only seemed to push more people toward Traoré's vision. The more they fought, the more traction Traoré's message gained. His platform wasn't just an online space, it had become a movement. As millions flocked to Solnet for guidance, they found themselves drawn into a world where everything they encountered, every post, every video, every recommendation, was carefully crafted to reinforce Traoré's ideological agenda. Hollywood's resistance was now spread thin. They had started out fighting for the soul of cinema, but now they found themselves up against something far bigger, a digital revolution that was capturing hearts and minds across the globe. Even politicians, once immune to the sway of media influence, were starting to change their tune, adopting Traoré's rhetoric in public speeches. As the digital web continued to grow, it became clear that this was no longer just a fight for control over Hollywood, it was a battle for the future of the entire world. The resistance realized they needed to do something drastic. They couldn't simply expose Traoré's manipulation anymore, they had to find a way to beat him at his own game. Hollywood's filmmakers, once focused solely on creating entertainment, now had to learn how to fight a cultural war on a global stage. They began to develop their own platform. One that could counteract Solnet's influence by promoting independent thought, free speech, and creative expression. But there was a problem: Traoré had already anticipated this. In a stunning turn of events, Traoré had embedded a network of influencers into every major social platform, including the one the resistance had just started to build. His digital web was so vast that it seemed there was no escaping it. Every time a new narrative was created to counter his, Traoré's algorithms learned from it, adapting and evolving to shut it down. His supporters, empowered by his teachings, began to harass and discredit anyone who spoke out against him. The resistance was fighting a digital battle that felt like it was being rigged from the start. The real danger, however, came when Traoré took things a step further. Through Solnet, he began pushing a new initiative, the Great Awakening. He claimed that the world was on the brink of spiritual collapse and that only those who followed his teachings could survive the coming storm. The initiative encouraged people to take a vow, pledging their allegiance not just to his vision of spirituality, but to the new world order he was creating. The more people that pledged, the more Traoré's influence grew. And with every pledge, a new follower was added to his network, a follower who would then spread the message, turning the digital landscape into a hive mind. Just when it seemed like Traoré's power could not be stopped, the resistance uncovered a dark secret within Solnet's architecture. Hidden deep within the platform's code was a tool so powerful that it could influence not just what people thought, but how they acted. A covert feature embedded in Solnet had the ability to send subconscious suggestions to users, nudging them toward specific actions that were entirely under Traoré's control. If activated, this feature could turn millions into unwitting puppets, carrying out his will without even realizing it. It was a terrifying thought. Traoré could literally command the masses to act according to his desires, making him not just a cultural leader, but a global tyrant. What if the only way to defeat a digital empire isn't by fighting with fire, but by creating something stronger? The resistance has one last chance to stop Traoré, but they'll have to play his game. The digital empire Traoré had built with Solnet was stronger than ever. The platform had become a global force, shaping not just opinions but actions. Millions had pledged allegiance to the Great Awakening, surrendering their free will to the idea that Traoré was their spiritual leader, their guide through a world on the brink of collapse. Hollywood's resistance, once focused solely on fighting for creative freedom, now had an even larger battle on their hands. They were fighting for the very autonomy of human thought. Desperation was creeping in. The resistance had learned about the subconscious manipulation feature hidden deep within Solnet's code, but they had no idea how to counteract it. Traoré was winning, and his supporters, loyal, passionate, and unyielding, were spreading his message faster than ever. Hollywood's creators, politicians, and activists who had once stood united in opposition to his control were now splintering, divided over the severity of the threat. Some believed it was too late to fight back, while others clung to the hope that somehow, they could reverse the tide. Then, in a last-ditch effort to break Traoré's hold on the world, the resistance turned to an unexpected ally, the very technology Traoré had used to manipulate the masses. They didn't have the power to create an army of digital soldiers to oppose him, but they did have something more dangerous, the ability to use his own algorithms against him. A group of rogue programmers, led by one of Traoré's former collaborators who had defected from his camp, developed a new platform. This platform, codenamed Elysium, was designed to work within the same digital ecosystem that Traoré had created, but with one crucial difference: Elysium wasn't designed to manipulate or control. It was designed to liberate. The idea was simple yet powerful. Elysium would create a safe haven for free thought, one where users could share ideas, create freely, and think critically without the subtle coercion of algorithms that influenced their decisions. The challenge was monumental. The resistance needed to convince millions to leave Solnet and embrace Elysium. Traoré had already woven his influence into every corner of the digital world. He had the media, the politicians, and the biggest names in entertainment on his side. But the resistance knew they had one last weapon: truth. The story of Traoré's manipulation was out there, waiting to be heard. If they could make people understand the danger of what was happening, Elysium could thrive. In a high-risk move, the resistance launched a global campaign, exposing the dark secrets of Solnet and the dangers it posed to free will. They focused on the one vulnerability Traoré hadn't anticipated, the human spirit. They flooded social media, news outlets, and every digital platform they could reach with stories of individuals who had broken free from Solnet's grasp. These were real people, who had regained their autonomy after seeing the truth. The hashtag #WakeUpFromTraoré started trending worldwide. For the first time in months, Traoré's influence began to waver. Users who had been quietly manipulated started questioning what they were being told. Could it be true? Was the platform that promised spiritual enlightenment actually a tool for control? The resistance had struck a nerve, and it was spreading like wildfire. Just as Elysium started gaining traction, Traoré revealed his most sinister move yet. He had planted sleeper agents within Elysium, agents who were now sabotaging the platform from within. They had access to its infrastructure, its communications, and even its user data. If Elysium became too successful, Traoré could destroy it from the inside out, turning it into just another puppet of his global empire. The resistance was now fighting two battles, one against the mind control of Solnet, and the other against the very system that was supposed to save them. What happens when the fight for freedom reaches its tipping point? Can a revolution of free thought truly defeat an empire built on control? The resistance's final move against Ibrahim Traoré will change everything. The resistance was at a crossroads. Elysium, their last hope for reclaiming control of global thought and culture, had become a battlefield itself. What had started as a noble attempt to create a safe space for independent thought and creativity now found itself under attack from within. Ibrahim Traoré, always 3 steps ahead, had infiltrated Elysium with sleeper agents who were systematically sabotaging the platform's infrastructure. With their every move under constant surveillance and manipulation, the resistance found themselves facing the impossible, a war on 2 fronts, both digital and ideological. As Elysium's vulnerabilities became apparent, the resistance knew they couldn't just play defense anymore. The time had come for a decisive strike. They had one last chance to turn the tide, and they needed to do something Traoré wouldn't see coming, an attack on his own platform, his own empire. In an unexpected twist, one of Traoré's most loyal followers, once a high-ranking member of his digital network, defected. This insider had seen the true cost of Traoré's vision. The manipulation, the control, the destruction of free will, and could no longer live with the guilt. In a final act of redemption, this insider handed over a critical piece of information, a backdoor into Solnet's system. This was the break the resistance had been praying for. They could now infiltrate the platform from within, disabling the algorithm that kept Traoré's influence alive. The clock was ticking. If the resistance didn't act fast, Solnet's power would only grow stronger, and the very fabric of global society would be irrevocably changed. They had to destroy the system Traoré had spent years building, but doing so would come at a high cost. The backdoor that had been provided was fragile. It could either collapse the entire platform, freeing billions from Traoré's control, or it could backfire and cause a digital apocalypse that would wipe out the entire resistance. With the world watching, the resistance launched their final operation. In the dead of night, teams of hackers, filmmakers, and activists who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes started the attack. As Elysium's algorithms fought to keep their platform intact, they executed a daring plan. They would inject a virus into Solnet that would undo everything Traoré had built, wiping his control from the digital sphere. The virus wasn't just a technical attack, it was a message. A message that free will and independent thought would never be subdued. But just as the virus began to spread, Traoré revealed his ace. In a dramatic public broadcast, he announced that he had anticipated the resistance's move. His loyal followers, many of whom had been unknowingly influenced by his digital network, had been planted in key positions within governments, tech companies, and media outlets worldwide. As the virus spread, these agents began to activate a backup protocol that would allow Traoré to regain control, rebuilding his empire from the ashes of the resistance's efforts. The final twist came when the resistance realized they had underestimated the scale of Traoré's influence. He wasn't just manipulating the digital world, he had been shaping the very world order itself. Political leaders, corporate moguls, and even religious figures who had once stood in opposition to him were now siding with him, either out of fear or genuine belief in his vision. The resistance was fighting not just for Hollywood's freedom, but for global freedom, against a leader who had turned the digital age into a tool for control. As the battle reached its climax, the virus finally triggered a cascade of events. Solnet's infrastructure began to crumble, but not before Traoré unleashed his final weapon, a global blackout. The world went dark. The digital revolution Traoré had promised was over. But in the darkness, the resistance had won. They had shattered his empire, but the cost was high. In the wake of the blackout, the resistance was left to rebuild from the ground up, knowing that while Traoré had been defeated for now, his influence would never be entirely gone. The final shot shows a lone figure watching from the shadows, a reminder that even though the battle for free thought was won, the war against control and manipulation was far from over. The digital empire has fallen, but the fight for freedom is only beginning. Will Ibrahim Traoré ever return, or has the resistance finally rid the world of his influence? The battle for control over global culture and thought will continue. Stay tuned for what comes next, and make sure you subscribe to stay informed on the next chapter of this global revolution.